Right, welcome to this explainer. We're not hanging around on the title screen today, so let's get stuck straight into the data.
Okay, take a look at this massive divide right out of the gates. On the one hand, you have everyday wages for the average worker here in Ireland. And on the other, you've got skyrocketing house prices just towering over them. It's a fairly stark visual, isn't it? The gap between what we actually earn in our pockets and what a home costs has stretched to an absolute breaking point. I mean, your wages are barely creeping up to match inflation, while the cost of your standard three-bed semi is absolutely soaring out of reach.
Which brings us to part one, the wage-price divide, essentially the broken bottom rung of the ladder.
So because wages simply aren't keeping pace with those prices, getting your foot on that bottom rung is completely blocked. Saving up for a deposit is now downright impossible for the average working family. You know, back in the day, you'd put away a few quid each week, and within a few years, sure, you had enough to go to the bank. But now, the goalposts just keep shifting. By the time you save what you thought you needed, the asking price of the house has jumped by another 20 or 30 grand. It's hugely frustrating for anyone just trying to put down roots in their own community.
Moving on to Section 2, the renting trap.
Now, why exactly is that deposit impossible to save? Well, it's down to the harsh reality of the rental market. When rent is eating up half or even well over half of your take-home pay, you're being absolutely fleeced. You're stuck in this trap with literally nothing left over at the end of the month to put away for a deposit. You're effectively paying off a landlord's mortgage, all while the banks are telling you that you don't have the financial capacity to pay your own. It is a vicious, demoralizing cycle, and it leaves hundreds of thousands of Irish people running on a treadmill just to keep a roof over their heads.
That takes us to Section 3, planning and supply shortages.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say you miraculously scrape the cash together, maybe getting a dig out from the bank of mum and dad. Well, you're immediately hit with a sheer structural failure. The whole system is completely bogged down. First, you have this immense demand for homes across the country. Then, step 2, that demand hits a massive brick wall of agonizing planning delays, local objections, and just a mountain of red tape. Which results in step 3, chronic supply shortages. We simply aren't building houses fast enough. You go to a viewing in Dublin, Galway, or Cork nowadays, and there is literally a queue out the door and down the street just to get a look at a cramped apartment.
Let's look at Section 4, families versus investor funds.
So, with such incredibly limited supply actually getting built, who's getting the keys? Well, look at the stark contrast here. This is a massive divide in the market. On one side, you have everyday working families who are just trying to find a secure place to raise their kids. And on the other, they are forced to compete against institutional investor funds. These funds swoop in with massive amounts of capital to buy up what little supply is actually out there, sometimes snapping up entire new build estates before they even hit the open market. It's a completely uneven playing pitch. The ordinary Irish buyer who's relying on a standard mortgage approval from the credit union or the bank simply cannot compete with the sheer bulk purchasing power of international capital.
Finally, Section 5, the emigration generation.
When the ladder is broken from top to bottom, the brutal human consequence of all these roadblocks is a massive wave of young people packing their bags and emigrating. And what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that unlike the 1980s or previous generations who had to take the boat because there was literally no work, this generation has jobs, good jobs too. But they're leaving because they've been entirely priced out of their own country. They're heading off to Perth, Toronto, or London purely in the hopes of being able to afford a decent standard of living and maybe, just maybe, buy a home of their own without bankrupting themselves.
This quote right here perfectly distills the overriding sentiment across the country right now. Owning a home in Ireland feels impossible. It's the exact conversation happening in every pub, around every kitchen table, and in every staff room in the state. For so many hardworking people today, despite doing absolutely everything right, getting the education, securing the job, putting in the long hours, the basic, fundamental milestone of homeownership feels like a permanently locked door.
So, the really crucial point to take away from this explainer is this final question. I want you to really think about this as we wrap up. If the ladder is completely broken for the working family, if the youth of Ireland are forced to emigrate, and if an entire generation of renters is trapped, who is the Irish housing market actually being built for? It's a tough question for sure, but until we properly answer it, that ladder isn't getting fixed. Thanks a million for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the tough questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.